Hello, everyone. I'm Chad J. Willett, the host of the web TV show Smash the Box. I have a great guest on today, Mr. Jason Barger, a friend of mine. And Jason is an author, keynote speaker, consultant, and host of Thermostat Podcast. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chad. Good to be here, man.
I appreciate it. I really do. And viewers out there, just so you know, I asked Jason to be on here, and I told him I wanted to go old school. You know, his step back from the baggage claim. I know it's always stuck with me, his messaging, his vision on that. And I think it applies so much to today. And Jace, we'll jump right into it. You know, step back from the baggage claim. You know, in there, you talk about how our lives are strings of these baggage claim moments. You know, you call them step back moments. You know, I know you wrote this book a few years ago, but I just like, even in 2020, I'm just like, can you explain this step back moment, what that is, and maybe how that applied to you? And then we'll expand from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I wrote it years ago, but it's amazing how relevant it is today. This idea, you know, we as humans have never been more hurried, busy, distracted in the history of the world. There's all kinds of statistics that tell us that nowadays. But this idea that we're all in this frenetic rush. And so the metaphor of the baggage claim of racing up to the baggage claim to claim what you think is yours, and in many cases knocking other people out of the way to get what you want. I watched this for 7 straight days in 7 different cities all across the US, the same scene of people racing up to kind of claim their bag. And yet our lives, again, metaphorically can feel like that. And so these step back moments are moments in our lives where we have a moment to kind of step back and see it from a broader vision and to say, is this truly how we want to move? And is this truly how we want to contribute to the space in front of us? So I've certainly, you know, in the book, I reference times in my life, step back moments for me, either serving, you know, building houses for people in Tijuana, Mexico, or a moment in Haiti one time where a father handed me his baby and was in Creole telling me, you know, which I didn't understand at the time, but he was trying to say, would I take his baby back to the United States so his kid would have a better life? You know, these moments where you kind of stop you in your tracks and you step back and you say, what does that mean for my life and the way that I'm going to choose to move? And now those are dramatic examples, but I think every single day, and certainly the world we're in right now in 2020, every day there are opportunities to kind of step back and say, all right, I know I'm rushing from thing to thing, but how do I step back and see the bigger view of who I'm trying to be in the world and what I'm trying to accomplish on my team or organization? And is this truly how we want to move?
Powerful. Hi, just one question on that, Jace. You know, the step back moment. How do we break? And I guess I'm speaking for myself, but hopefully the viewers out there. How do we break that record? You know, we say just the rush. You know, the to-do list, the checklist, the Outlook calendar. Like, how do you do? You know, how do you break it? How do you break out of that? I know you were in the airport. You know, what did you say? 7 days, 7 days, 7 nights. It's like, and like you said, that's dramatic, but it gave you that experience. But like, how do we break the day in, day out rushing, you know, when we're in that mindset?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to be intentional. And so I know all I can speak is for my own life. And then certainly I can talk about what for the teams and organizations that I'm lucky to support, you know, to be talking about, well, what is the ethic through which we want to run? And so for my own life, I've had to get intentional. I mean, I have a lot happening in my life too. I've got a wife, I've got 3 kids, I've got, certainly I'm lucky to get to serve teams and organizations across the country and around the world. So there's a lot happening in my life, which means I can either be frantically running from place to place and meeting to meeting, or I have to plan and intentionally carve out time, whether that's my morning routine to make sure that I am healthy myself, to make sure that I'm building time to study throughout the year, time to step away from work and to connect with my family. All of those things are intentional ways in which I have to create space in my own life. And so, and I believe that in that space, greater things for me and greater things for the people around me and my work emerge because of that. But you have to be intentional.
That leads me right into the second theme, Jason. You talk about creating space and doing something greater to emerge, right? To take that step back to allow something greater in your life to emerge. Like you talked about going to Tijuana and then your other trip, you know, where you said that I think the dad handed you the baby. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah.
I mean, it's so powerful. And I guess my question is, let me start here. If we don't take a step back, and all the viewers out there, and I fall in it too, all of us who don't take a step back and we just continue to rush and frantic, what's the result? It's just, what would you say? Like those who don't take a step back.
Yeah, well, I just think we run the risk of burning out, of course, but I think we run the risk of just losing perspective on the people that we want to be. And also we run the risk of only seeing things from one angle of vision. And part of stepping back and creating space, either individually or as a team, is to challenge the thinking and allow to say, what if we saw this differently? What if we experienced something new? What if we saw that maybe there's a different way to do this? I mean, which fits into a lot of the themes that you talk about in Smashing the Box, is allowing space for creativity. So we have to do that. You know, the research, everybody's familiar with the research that Malcolm Gladwell made famous. He didn't do this study, but there's a study that was done years ago that he has made famous, where he talks about the 10,000 hours of deliberate practice in order to become an expert. And so, you know, everybody has latched onto that because it's such a powerful thing that in order to become an expert at anything, you have to have 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, is what it shows. But in that exact same study, there's a part of the research that nobody talks about. And it's the fact that also in that research, it said that in order to be elite and to be that kind of excelling in performance, you also, not only do you need 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, but you need 12,500 hours of deliberate rest. And yet nobody talks about that. We talk about this again. Of course, we got to work hard. We got to practice. In order to become an expert in whatever it is you do, you're going to have to train and practice and work hard. But also, I think the part, especially in our culture, that maybe we forget is that deliberate rest, which means creating space in our lives so that our minds, which are actually our computers, can kind of shut down and defrag our system so that we can then be better at what we do. And we actually are better. And I know that from my own life as a father, a husband, and certainly for the work the connection that I do with teams and organizations.
Absolutely. That's a great point about Gladwell and the hours about rest, deliberate rest. And I want to throw this out there, Jason. Tell me if you agree. I don't know if you're going there with this, with your step back from the baggage claim, but the more I talk to you, the more I read about your book and learn from you, to me, it takes a lot more discipline, a lot more time, and a lot more sacrifice. And I keep going back, I guess, to the word discipline, to step back and do what you're saying. Be deliberate, be intentional. It's much harder to do that. It's much easier, at least I'm speaking from my personal experience, hopefully the viewers, it's much easier for us to get in the rat race. And like you said, just go, and just check things off the list and check to me, that's much easier. I know it's kind of counterintuitive. It's much harder to step back, whether it's investments, right? To just build your 401k and let it ride, as long as you believe in your investments, right? Or like you're saying, step back and take a trip to Tijuana, and help these people who need help. I mean, to me, and in so many ways, it takes so much. It's kind of like I said, I keep going back counterintuitive. You think, when you step back, you kind of think, well, I'm being lazy, right? Or I'm not getting as much done, or I'm not as productive. But to me, it's almost the opposite. It's like self-restraint and discipline is so much harder to put into practice than just getting on the treadmill, the endless treadmill.
Yeah. And I think there's a distinction between stepping back and going backwards. That sometimes people in their head think that if I take time to rest, or if I don't just go. Again, we as a culture have lived into this idea. I talk about it in some of my other books, and some of the other things that kind of building off a step back from the baggage claim, is this idea that we as a culture, we honor busyness, and somehow along the way we've equated busyness to equate to effectiveness. Somehow we've bought into this myth that the faster I run, the further I get. And so what it has created within us as individuals and also teams and organizations is, if we just run around doing stuff and continuously doing activity all the time, that somehow we thought that means that we are that 10,000 hours of practice, that we're working hard. And yet the reality is oftentimes we're not spending that time on the most important priorities. And so we're spinning our wheels. Stepping back is about creating space and being intentional. And I agree with you. You have to be more disciplined to do it, to make space to say, hold on, let me give my full attention, my full mind and heart to my highest priorities. And so I have to spend time throughout the year of, even though I could take on another client assignment or do another speech or do another something, I have to create time to step back and actually plan time for me to think, plan, develop my own creative energy to make sure that I am aligned in my thinking. And from stepping back, I come out of that and I step back, but I actually move forward. And so that means the same thing with every team and organization. Every time I lead a leadership session or a retreat or a facilitated with an executive leadership team or a culture shaping initiative with a company, people come into it with the mindset of how can we take the time, to stop. We've got so much to do, but every time we take the time to step back, to make sure we align our thinking, we get clear on where we're going, we come out of that time actually more effective than if we had all just scattered and kept running. And that's the reality.
That's brilliant. Before we go to the last question, Jason, kind of wrap up toward the end. Can I ask you, your 7 years, 7 days, not 7 years, 7 days at the baggage claim.
Yeah.
That'd be too many, right? What, I guess, maybe it was, the dad handing you the baby, or maybe it was something else, but what was one of your biggest revelations those 7 days? Like when you took a step back from the craziness and kind of observed and just, you saw everyone running up to the baggage claim and it's kind of me, and I'm sure all this stuff, right? Knocking people over, everything you saw. I guess, what was one of the biggest lessons you took from that experience of yours during those 7 days in different airports?
Well, there's so many, and I talk about many of them in the book. There's so many great things that at least I reflected on and that I witnessed in, like, literally in the airports. But then it also made me think about, again, metaphorically for other areas of my life or career that it made me think about. But just to pick one of them, I'd say, we are in such we get tunnel vision, and we get so obviously focused on where we're trying to go and to get from point A to point B. So when we're traveling, like literally get from wherever it is you start to wherever it is that you end up, and we can put our head down and just go. And yet along that path, the old cliche that it's not about the destination, but it's about the journey, right? And yet we can get so focused on the destination of where we're going that we lose sight of everything that happens along the way. And one of the things that I noticed on that trip in 7 days, 7 different cities and the airports, was as I actually allowed myself to observe and watch other people that were also moving around me. And actually, I wasn't seeking out conversation, walking up to people and just, trying to do that, because I wanted it to be natural. But as I began to be aware of the people around me, the people that sat next to me on the airplanes, the people that sat next to me in the restaurant or up at the bar, that I ran into standing around the baggage claim, as I just allowed myself to actually connect with them and to talk with them and be aware of where are they headed, how are they traveling, and then to actually care about them and listen to them, I learned some amazing things about these people that were right around me, that were not only interesting people, but were also going somewhere. And so again, as a metaphor for our lives, is that every single day, and certainly within our teams and organizations, the people around us that are also on the journey with us, rather than just putting our head down and trying to complete the tasks, we will be better at what we do when we actually are aware of the people that we are traveling with and actually try to support and bring out the best in each other, rather than just put our head down and try to get to the destination.
Awesome. Jason, let's wrap it with this. I'm excited to ask you this question. 2020, we're in a COVID pandemic, right? Craziness going on. I guess, can you use your imagination and go with me? And what would your experience be like today? Yeah, if you went to, say, CMH, any airport, right? JFK, pick it, and you're at the baggage claim. And say you have 7 days now in 2020. What I guess, do you think, would it be similar to what you experienced years ago, or do you think with this COVID it'd go a different angle? Or I would love your thoughts, kind of.
Yeah, I think it would be different in the sense that right now, airports are ghost towns in so many ways. And so there'd be, there's just fewer travelers. And so that kind of frenetic, hectic, herd mentality rush around the baggage claim, wouldn't necessarily, at JFK, you may not feel that like you typically would. But I think what it would again, to carry the metaphor out further, right now in 2020, I mean, you think about everything that is swirling around the metaphorical baggage claims of our lives right now. You've got a pandemic that nobody understands and is a health crisis that we've never experienced in the world. We've got political uncertainty and division. We've got economic uncertainty. We've got Black Lives Matter, civil unrest, racial divide. We've got, do our kids go to school or homeschooled? We've got all these things that are swirling around the metaphorical baggage claim in our lives. And in many teams and organizations, instead of running up to the baggage claim, we've asked our employees and people to work remotely. And so rather than crowding the baggage claim, everybody has been scattered and in many ways isolated. And so the opposite, although the themes are all the same, the challenge right now, at least as I support teams and organizations, is now we've asked people to quarantine and isolate. And yet what many people are experiencing in the midst of a very noisy and negative and divided world is that people feel disconnected and they feel divided and they are literally isolated by physical distance. And so the challenge for all of us and for every team and organization right now is going to be, how do we help people make sense of all of this that's swirling around the baggage claim, and knowing that people have differing opinions about all of it? But how to, rather than divide people, how do we connect people? And instead of being in isolation and socially distancing, our teams and organizations and the important people in our lives, like, we need to still have our minds and hearts engaged with each other and in the work we do. And so, in my opinion, the opportunity right now for teams and organizations, for companies, is we need to help make sure that the place of work, which many people spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day at their places of work, these have to be cultures that actually help people navigate their way through all that noise and help bring out the best in people rather than the worst in people. And teams and organizations have a tremendous opportunity to connect people and help people engage their mind and heart in healthy ways, rather than continue to contribute to the division, the noise, the negativity, and the disconnection.
That's great. Your metaphorical baggage claim that you talk about today, that's brilliant. And I those two words I keep writing down, JC, as you're talking about today, 2020, isolated and disconnected. That to me is probably the metaphorical baggage claim you and I are talking. That's what we would see now. You're right. It's not maybe the frantic and what you saw years ago, but yeah, it's more probably less dense, less people, but definitely the isolation, the disconnection. And one more, I'll end it with this, Jason. If you want to riff on this, one more word I'd add to that: isolated, disconnected, the metaphorical baggage claim is fear. All these guests I talk, it's fear. And again, it's not saying one side's right or wrong. It seems like fear is just so prevalent. And some of the things you're talking about, political uncertainty, the pandemic, I think for a lot of people, their job, worry about their jobs. And I guess as we finish it with this, do you have any thoughts about, I go back to one of your original statements, those step back moments in life, for all those viewers out there who are watching, and, let's say they're consumed by fear, or they're working remotely, and yeah, they do feel isolated and they do feel disconnected and they do feel all the things you and I are talking about. And how would those viewers step back and deal with the fear they have in their lives right now?
Well, one thing is we have to name it. And so even just being aware of that, and that fear is a part, I mean, there's a lot of that it's not surprising that people are fearful right now with everything that's been happening in the world. And so, but what I talk about is that right now, part of that stepping back, again, if we're intentional about creating space and allowing ourselves to kind of step back, take a deep breath, that there's courage in sitting in ambiguity, that requires courage for us to actually step back, and sit in this space of ambiguity and unknown. But then there's two pathways that our mindsets can typically go down. One side is this fear-based and doom and gloom and who's to blame. And we can spend a lot of time in this kind of fearful, blaming mentality. And every time we catch ourselves starting to go down that side of our mindset, in my opinion, we have to step back and say, hold on, that's not where I understand that's the fight or flight mentality that comes into our brains, but I can't live in that space. I need to allow myself to go down the other side of my mindset, which is, where are opportunities and what am I grateful for? And even in the midst of uncertainty, how is it that I want to be committed to moving? And so if I'm in a job that's uncertain, there's things that are out of my control, but there's also things that are within my control. As I look at my family, as I look at my friends, as I look about, all right, who is it that I'm going to be in the world, and how am I going to contribute? All of those things are within our control. And so I'm not saying that it's simple or easy, but I am saying that it takes intentionality to step back and to say, am I going to have the courage to kind of sit in this ambiguity and then allow myself to say, which of these mindsets am I going to breathe oxygen into? Because we all right now, some of the language I've been using in many speeches and with many teams and organizations is we need to make sure that we're breathing oxygen into ourselves and also breathing oxygen into the people around us, rather than the kind of thinking or behaviors or habits that actually take our oxygen or don't give oxygen to other people. We got to make sure we're breathing oxygen into healthy, positive, good stuff, not the stuff that contributes to the noise, the negativity, the bad stuff.
Jason, this is riveting. I mean, I could talk hours with you. And for all the viewers out there, just to recap, to me, it's such a powerful theme and metaphor he has. If we want step back moments in our life, if we want to see things from a different angle, a different perspective, and I keep going back to discipline and restraint. I think it takes a lot more discipline, a lot more restraint to take a step back. Like he says, a step back is it's gaining perspective. It's gaining clarity. It's seeing things from a different angle, experiencing people from a different culture or a different way of life, and it takes discipline. And it's so powerful. I could go on, but Jason, as we wrap it up, how can viewers, if they want to get a copy of this book, Thermostat Culture, any of your books, what's the best way? Is it the website? What's the best way for viewers to get a hold of it?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. You can certainly check out Jason V as in Victor, Jason V Barger, BARGER.com. JasonVBarger.com is your first kind of stop if you want to learn about my books or what stuff I'm doing. Certainly Amazon or any other place you get books, you can find that stuff. And then you can track me down on social media at Jason V Barger. And as you said, the Thermostat podcast with Jason Barger, you can find that where you find podcasts.
Jason, you're a thought leader. We need it. I mean, it's brilliant stuff. I really, really appreciate you being on the show, and we will leave it at that. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and Jason, thanks for being on here.
All right, man. Thank you. Good to be on the show, and keep up the good work.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.